People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
All these years, I thought I knew you, but you turned out to be a stranger.
We are fighting for our lives, Anne. My family must survive.
Yes, the most shocking experience of their lives. Doubly shocking because it can happen to you.
Stay away from that trailer.
What are you gonna do? Call the cops? They're busy with the new highway patrol.
Now, Rick!
The lawless are on the loose, making it necessary for law-abiding citizens to make their own law.
When I get going, fire a shot over their heads. Maybe that'll upset them.
Right.
There are no civilians. We are all at war.
Give me a gun. I'm good with a gun. I'll stay here and I'll kill them.
This is civilization's jungle, after the jackals of society have ruthlessly ravaged it, ending the world of decency.
Killed 2 men.
I tried to kill them too, but I missed. I just wasn't a good enough shot.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Emily Intravia.
Hey, hey.
Also back in the booth after far too long is Mr. Howard A. Rodman.
Hello.
We conclude Sci-Fi July with a look at Ray Milland's Panic in Year Zero. Based on the stories Lot and Lot's Daughter by Ward Moore, the film also stars Milland as Henry Baldwin, the patriarch of the Baldwin family, a Los Angeles family on a camping trip that turns into a desperate fight for survival. Along with Milland, the film stars Gene Hagen, Mary Mitchell, and Frankie Avalon. It's an early entry in the nuclear apocalypse subgenre, released in the height of the Cold War anxiety. We will be spoiling this film as we go forward, so if you don't want anything ruined, turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen it. We will still be here. So, Emily, when was the first time you saw Panic in Year Zero, and what did you think?
When you first asked me about this movie, I was trying to remember if I had seen it. Because there's a whole bunch of movies that are very similar between probably about a 30-year gap. And as I started looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I've seen this. Wait, no, that's Blades of Grass. Wait, I've seen this. No, that's 8 other movies that this could have been. 5 was the other one I kept thinking it was. And then I went to watch it. I'm like, oh, wait, this is Panic in the Streets, which I always write accidentally instead of Panic in the Year Zero. But then I finally watched it and said, oh, no, I have seen this. And I watched it maybe 5-ish years ago. I feel like this might have been a Netflix disc at the time where it wasn't that easy to find. And it was always one that would come up in different apocalypse books of all these movies that I had on my checklist to see. And it didn't leave much of an impression back then, which is why I didn't remember if I'd seen it or not. Rewatching it this week in this place of time in the year 2025, it played really differently. I won't say in a bad way, because I think there's stuff about the film that obviously we'll get into. Politically, socially, it was a really different experience watching it today than maybe 5-10 years ago when we weren't quite where we are in the world right now.
Howard, how about yourself?
I came to this film by a very different path, Emily. So when I was growing up, there was an institution in New York called the $1 Million Movie, which was a TV broadcast of movies. And at that point, there was not enough programming to fill an entire programming day for some local stations. So they would either broadcast what was clearly filler. I mean, on some of it's hard to believe now, but the ratio of hamburger to hamburger helper on some of these local stations was a bit dodgy. Or they would just rebroadcast something. And on the $1 Million Movie, for whatever that week was, they would show the movie every night and sometimes multiple times on weekends. So if you saw the movie on a Monday and you liked it, you just kept showing up. And there were a couple that were cult favorites among me and my teeny bopper friends. And I think one of them was Panic in the Year Zero, ! And Two Telltales Out of School, although I think the statute of limitations has passed on this, myself, my friend Harold Doohan, who later became Adam Doohan, and of blessed memory, and the late Walter Becker, late of Steely Dan. The three of us and sometimes some friends would sit on a couch, either in my living room or Walter's, and we would have, in preparation, gone to the local drugstore and bought as many bottles of Romalar as they would let us get away with, which was a cough syrup, which in that day and age actually contained codeine, as opposed to more useless substitutes. And we would get woozy on Romalar and watch Panic in the Year Zero, and loved it so much that we would come back the next night to do it again. So that was my introduction to the film.
I'm jealous. I wish that was mine.
In some ways, I can't quite put my finger on it, but the story of nuclear family in a post-nuclear world spoke to us, especially with the aid of opiates.
Yeah, my story is not nearly as impressive. No Steely Dan, no codeine, nothing. I remember, probably similar to you, Emily, I probably saw it around the time of those Netflix days. I don't know if I saw it or if it was on cable, but yeah, definitely saw this around like the early 2000s. And it left a little bit of an impression on me. I remember liking it, and I always love nuclear apocalypse movies. I don't know why, probably just because growing up in the 80s and being threatened by that, growing up and watching Threads and The Day After. Yeah, so all of that was ingrained in me. So going back and seeing some of these earlier ones, which just seem so quaint, and they really don't talk about radiation whatsoever. There's really no problem with radiation. And I've complained about this before on the show, where we've gotten back to now, where people are like, oh, we'll just drop a nuclear bomb in that hurricane. Sure, that'll get rid of it. We'll just throw a nuke at Godzilla, who's 5 miles off the coast of San Francisco. That's not going to be a problem, is it?
I came to The Day After late because I missed it in the initial broadcast. I was too young. But I think it was the Sci-Fi Channel before it was the Sci-Fi Channel, back when it was SCI-FI. In 94, maybe, they aired it. And it was just a random day where I'm like, little teenage me is flipping around and lands on this movie and doesn't know what it is. But for the next, I think, 3.5 hours, and they just aired it in its entirety. I just sat there and probably turned progressively like more ashen as the movie ended and looked around and said, wait, you thought this was... Oh God. And it launched that obsession. And it was much later when I saw Threads. So just imagine the world that it could have been.
Yeah. Threads was like the real deal. The Day After scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, it's hellish. It changed Reagan's view on nuclear war, right?
But then you see Threads and you're like, oh my God.
There is now a film called Television Event, which is about the 1983 broadcast of The Day After.
Oh, wow.
It's exciting.
It's a documentary, has interviews with Nick Meyer, who directed it, whom you may know better from the Sherlock Holmes 7% series or Star Trek II Wrath of Khan. And this includes interviews with Nick, but also footage with Ted Koppel, Carl Sagan, Henry Kissinger, Robert McNamara, William F. Buckley Jr., Elie Wiesel. It's that kind of thing. So if you're into not only post-apocalypticism, but the history of post-apocalypticism as received by the American public. I think you would enjoy it.
I'm definitely going to have to check that one out because for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's just nostalgia, but it's all right. No Blade of Grass, as you said.
Testament.
Yeah. Oh, boy. That was another good one.
Damnation Alley with Dominique Sanda.
That vehicle that Jan Michael Vincent and George Papard drive around. So cool. I love that.
I think there's so much to it. I think there's there's the era, if you lived through it, I think it's the same with the zombie apocalypse. It is that weird not wish fulfillment, but there is an aspect of, I know what I would do. I know how I'd survive. I live near York. I'm going to die in the first bomb, I hope, if everything goes well, because I don't want to deal with that. The reason I think zombies caught on eventually when they did, like growing up, we were big zombie fans, and we always just did the scenario of, okay, we're walking at night. What happens if a zombie comes out? Most apocalyptic movies or post-apocalyptic movies are putting normal, everyday people in these situations, right? Sure, you have your road warriors and you have your kind of more extreme, but this, right, and the movies around this time were very much the pure nuclear family, exactly who you could be in this scenario. And if you're a good man, you can figure out how to survive it and save your family. And I think there is a lot of that. And this is where it gets into that weird territory that I'm sure we'll go into of today in 2025, where it's become a source of pride. I think there are this idea that there are people that kind of secretly want World War III to happen because it would give them a chance to show off why they keep their guns and why they need their rights and why they have all of this. And it justifies things. But at the same time, you get it. It's really appealing. It's very exciting to watch.
Absolutely, Emily, but there is a certain kind of wish fulfillment here, which is, God, if there were a nuclear war, I could unleash my inner Jordan Peterson. I could show them what an alpha I am.
I don't have to put on pants. I don't have to comb my hair.
I could be a Chad. I grew up in the 1950s under the shadow of the bomb, and we would regularly have duck and cover drills in school. And all kinds of cheerful nostrums like, don't look out the window, the fireball will melt your eyeballs. But stay safe under your desk, as if getting under the desk in PS 196Q Class 5 would save you from a Holocaust that would melt everything else in the world. And I remember, I'll come out of the closet on this, my mother was a communist. She was a Stalinist.
Hang on, I got to make a phone call.
Yeah, sure. Feel free. Statute of limitations, once more. And she said, these things are stupid. If there's a nuclear war, we're all going to die. So
and that's a good thing.
The next time there was a duck and cover drill at PS 196Q, I didn't go under the desk. And my teacher said, why not? And I parroted what my mother had said, which was, if there's a nuclear war, we're all going to die. And she sent me to the principal's office. And I assumed I was going to get lectured and maybe do detention, God knows what. And it was the weirdest goddamn thing. The principal, a guy named Abraham Tauschner, the principal of PS 196, talked to me in a kind of rambling way for 20, maybe 30 minutes about the fact we're all going to die, and it is death that gives life meaning, but also renders life meaningless. It was like I expected to be reprimanded. Instead, I got Albert Camus.
A philosophy lesson.
And then after he was finished talking about death and meaning, then he just said, go back to class. And it was one of the weirder things of a very weird childhood. Yeah.
I have a mother involving duck and cover story because my mother grew up also in the 50s. And about 16, 17 years ago, I actually lived in Russia for a year. I was teaching English there. And I had a class of adults, lawyers, and professionals. And my mother had come to visit and I brought her to the class. And it was fascinating because my mother has never really been abroad, and she's talking to Russians. She's saying to them, growing up, you guys were the enemy. I was so scared of you. And she's going through what it was like. And she was talking about duck and cover and how we thought you were going to bomb us. So when a bell would ring and then we'd all have to go under the desks. And my students, who were probably in their early 30s, late 20s, looked and they were just so, wait, what was your school like? You had a bomb shelter? No, we just went under the desks. Wait, you went under a desk for a nuclear bomb? And it finally hit my mother. Oh my God, we weren't going to survive. Why did they make us do that?
Better late than never.
Yeah, it took the Russians to teach her that.
And I also think, Emily, that you're right to draw the parallel between the sort of wave of post-apocalyptic films, which in some ways morphed into zombie apocalypse films. Many of the same, we are barricaded here in our house, everybody outside is either radioactive, and a lot in connection with these films are the kind of inciting incident, if you will. There's a big externality, the bomb drops. But really, they're about community, neighborhood. How thin is the veneer of civilization? What does it take to strip us away from our quote-unquote civilized selves and turn us into Hobbesian, I've got mine? After I rewatched Panic in the Year Zero this week, without the aid of cough syrup, I was reminded of a 1959 Twilight Zone episode, which you may be familiar, called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Do you know that one?
Yes, I thought you were going to say the one in the bomb shelter. I forget the name of it, but there's one where a family has built a bomb shelter and they're not letting the other family in. Oh, yeah, Maple Street is the episode that made me want to write, actually.
The episode Emily is referring to is The Shelter, Season 3, Episode 3 of The Twilight Zone.
Let me just quote Rod Serling, if I might. This is his sort of afterword to the episode. The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosion and fallout. They are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout of its own for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined only to the Twilight Zone.
It's amazing to look at some of the films that were coming out around this time. We spoke earlier this year about On the Beach. I forgot that we had already done a post-apocalyptic film this year. On the Beach, 1959, The World of Flesh and the Devil, 1959, The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. I would consider La Jetée to be a post-apocalyptic film, 1962. Ladybug, 1963. Fail Safe and Dr. Strangelove in 64. Peter Watkins, The War Game in 1965. Ironically, we've already done Late August in the Hotel Ozone. That was 1966. And then it just continues from there, of course. It's never really gone out of style, I don't think. But yeah, that's a killer list of amazing films. Interestingly, on this list I'm looking at, there is The Creation of the Humanoids, which we covered quite a few years ago, also written by Jay Sims, who wrote the screenplay for this. Jay Sims, probably best known these days for writing The Killer Shrews, one of the best Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies, and then also, that same year, The Giant Gila Monster came out as well, which he wrote.
Also a good MST episode.
Yeah, this guy was knocking them out of the park.
Music coordinator for this, who is Al Sims, did all of the bikini movies. Any movie with bikini in the title. Bikini Beach Party, Goldfoot and the Wild Bikini, The Return of Dr. Goldfoot, How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. Bikini Al Sims. I mean, he in the bikini cinematic universe, he owns musically. And I love the Les Baxter movie and the Al Sims music in this. And I actually found on Spotify, there is a soundtrack album.
I would listen to this soundtrack out of context. I think it is a really good soundtrack. I like the idea of this jazzy score over... It's very incongruous in a way because it's getting back to, and here you have wild drums and saxophone, but there are times where this score is just so intrusive that I think it genuinely affects this movie.
Absolutely. And you can see it as Brechtian if you want to be charitable. But
again, this is a case where it's like, oh, I get why the codeine helps.
And if I can go off on a tangent and I'm not derailing you, I also think that in addition to this belonging to the genre of post-apocalyptic films, it also is part of another genre, which is the sort of disturbed teenager movie, the cool and the crazy or the delinquents, the kind of Richard Bacallian cinematic universe that goes through all of this. He plays Carl. But Dick Bacallian was it. Him and Scott Marlowe were in all of these movies about beatniks, disturbed teenagers, all of whom were hopped up on Mary Jane and then did bad things. And in some ways, this feels to me like that episode of Dragnet, which is about drugs, or The Delinquent School and the Crazy, where it's about finger snapping, about jazz, and about the threat that young, and of course, the apotheosis of this is Rebel Without a Cause. And if you look at James Dean's Harrington jacket in that, and if you look at Frankie Avalon's jacket in this, you can see the kind of through line. But I do think that in some ways, in addition to this being about the nuclear family under threat from the bomb, it's also about the American white picket fence nuclear family being under threat from the teenage rebellion that's just under the white picket fence of the Eisenhower years.
And it's like that teenage rebellion can run wild in this one because there are no police anymore. So you can take all of those things from the delinquent movies and take them to their quote unquote logical end, where we've got them armed, very dangerous, going after this family, very open. And then the whole thing with them torturing the girl. Of course, that's where the delinquents would take it if there was no rule of law around.
I feel like this movie had the potential to be really fascinating and great. And I don't think it really gets there. But because I think part of the most interesting kernel of the movie is Frankie Avalon character, because he's there as this sort of, okay, the dad is trying to teach him because he knows, okay, I need you in order to, the two of us, of course, we have to keep the women safe because they can't do anything. We have to keep you safe. You have to learn to kill, but not to enjoy it. And there's all that. And there's a moment early on, like somewhere in the middle where I can't remember if it's after they shoot one of the beatnik kids, but where Frankie Avalon smiles and the dad kind of sees it and you see him upset by it. And that's a story right there to see where he's going to go. And I think, not to jump everywhere, but going back to the short stories that this is based on, and I don't know how much that is, but my jaw dropped at the end of the first short story when I realized what was happening. But it was so much about the dad looking at his kids and saying, this one's going to make it, this one's not going to make it, this one's not. And I just wish in a way it was a little bit digging deeper into who is Frankie Avalon becoming in this movie. Is he going to be the dad in 20 years, or is he going to be one of these other delinquents going around and taking other people's property and women and so on? But I don't, and also I get it. It's the year and the time, and this wasn't going for that kind of story, but it's just like, I'm like, oh, are we going to pull? No, okay, we ran out of time.
But I think you're absolutely right to point to that as the kind of moral dilemma at the center of this movie. I think Ray Milland's line to Frankie Avalon is, and I love this because it so encapsulates all of this, I want you to use that gun if you have to, but I want you to hate it.
That is a great line.
Yeah. And it says, a big piece of civilization is gone, and your mother wants you to save what's left. Try to unpack that. A big piece of civilization is gone, and your mother, not me, your mother wants you to save what's left. I think you're absolutely right, Emily. Posits this as a kind of theme, sometimes rather deliberately, sometimes over deliberately, but then doesn't quite take it to the extremes that, say, a late 60s movie might, of really tearing that character apart in a kind of Straw Dogs kind of way.
There's no real transition to his character. He looks the same as he did in the beginning.
But there is that sort of weird smile on his face. And I love that moment.
Yeah, so much of this is the Ray Milland story. Of course, it makes sense. He's the director, and his cheapest star. He does a great job with the direction of this, and I love Ray Milland. I've always enjoyed Ray Milland. This period of his career was interesting because this was right before he worked with, I think it was Roger Corman, who did X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. I can't remember who directed that. Or
he definitely worked with Corman quite a bit.
I mean, he did those movies like the Wilder movie, the Hitchcock movie, Lost Weekend, Dial for Murder. But he also had directed, at this point, if I'm correct, and if I'm not, please correct me, A Man Alone, Lisbon, The Safecracker, which are good, competent B minus. So this was not his directorial debut, and I think he actually knew what he was doing. And not in as, when, forgive the implicit screenwriterly bias here, but when actors turn directors, sometimes you get a lot of showy performances because, oh, look what I can do in acting if I weren't constrained by that director. And sometimes you get weird, unexpected pieces of genius, like Charles Laughton's Night of the Hunter. But here it feels to me like he is doing a far better directorial job and I'm not sure that self-effacing is the right way, but I would say very economical and professional. It reminds me more of, say, on that spectrum, more Howard Hawks than Orson Welles.
Just for the record, yes, Roger Corman directed X, the Man with the X-Ray Eyes, also a score by Les Baxter. And yes, that Les Baxter music is intense. A lot of the time. We start with that shot of the radio.
On the AM radio. You see an AM radio dial in a car.
And then we pull back and get that title on there. And yeah, like you guys are saying, as far as this being somewhat post-apocalyptic, but somewhat, if not more, a survivalist film. And this is year zero. We were starting from scratch. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Civilization, other than that small piece that you're mentioning that your mother wants you to keep, is gone. And we just see the breakdown through so much of the first, probably into the second act of this film, as they realize what's going on. Well, they don't ever seem to really realize, to me. Like, it feels like they don't really connect with the fact that Los Angeles is just gone now, or at least maybe I don't know. It's so strange. Like I said, without the radiation and the destruction, it just feels like sometimes they're like, we don't want to go into that area. Okay, because at the end, aren't they going back to Los Angeles?
The central question, is my mom okay?
Yeah, and then we have to just stop asking that very quickly. In some ways, the beginning of the film is actually the most interesting part to me of this family is going out for a vacation. They realize, an hour into their ride, that there are bombs over Los Angeles. And I think this is so much, and this is where I think this aspect of the short story does feel very much there, of it being purely dad knows what to do. Who knows why? I forget what he does for a living, if they say it. I think they do.
He gets so annoyed. That whole short story, at least the first one, and we'll definitely talk about the second one, but that first short story just feels like I am pissed off at all times. Just feels like the dad who you don't want to mess with because he's going to turn around.
Dad is always right. Don't piss off dad. Dad doesn't like you to tap your foot. Don't tap your foot.
If you were sitting in the back of that car and you said, how much longer, he would turn around and literally bite your head off and spit it out the window.
The Ray Milland version of that is not, he's not that, but he is immediately survivalist of, I know exactly what we have to do. We are not going to stop. We're going to keep driving. We'll stop at a phone. If we can't get your mother, we're just going to keep going. We're not going to go to the main road. We're going to go to a side road. We are not going to tell the proprietor right away what's going on. We're going to go somewhere where they are a little bit less in the know and they don't know. So we're going to buy everything first. We're going to pay for everything first. And then we're a good person. We're going to say, hey, by the way, turn on the news. Something really bad's happening. You should shut things down. You should take your stuff and go. So it's very the evolution of it. And then immediately the next stop he makes, which is the gun shop, where he similarly, I need a gun. I need this. I need that. Here's everything. And already it's getting a little bit looser as far as, yeah, okay, fine. I'll pay you double. And then gun laws, what do you know, in 1962, I can't sell it to you right now. You got to come back tomorrow for it. And he does the trick that the one era of my life where I played PlayStation, I had a stressful job and I would kill an hour in the afternoon by playing Grand Theft Auto, and all I would do is drive around and shoot people and do violence. Dark time in my life. I'm good now. But one thing you cannot do is you cannot go into a gun shop and purchase guns and immediately try to shoot the proprietor of that shop in order to not pay for them, because the proprietor is going to be faster with a gun than you are. And I was very happy to be validated in this movie when that happens. And then, of course, the gun shop guy comes back. But there's just something to that of how it quickly progresses into, okay, I was the good guy with the grocery store owner. I'm a little bit less of the good guy now with the gun store owner. And now we're going down that slope.
The only time that doesn't hold water is if you are Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back in time and able to take out Dick Miller as the gun proprietor.
Anything else?
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Hey, just what you see, pal.
The Uzi 9mm.
You know your weapons, buddy. Any one of these is ideal for home defense. So, which will it be?
All.
I may close early today. There's a 15-day wait on the handguns, but the rifles you can take right now. You can't do that.
The politics of this film are really interesting because on the one hand, there's a very strong strain of patriarchalism. Father knows best with a gun in his hand. But there's also some kind of, I think, some weird left-wing politics as well that kind of thread through this. I don't know if this is true, but I have read that Ward Moore was expelled from DeWitt Clinton High School in New York for his pacifism during World War I. I do know in a more confirmed way that he was in the Federal Writers Project of the WPA with people like Ralph Ellison and Nelson Algren and Zora Neale Hurston and John Cheever and Studs Terkel and Jim Thompson, of all people, and Richard Wright and Saul Bellow. And there was a strong kind of left liberal strain in that, too. And I think there is, at one and the same time, a kind of endorsement of nuclear war would be a very bad thing. But also, if there were a nuclear war, the men's job is to kill other men and protect their women, with a strong underlining of the possessory adjective.
Well, that's what I really liked about the second story, Lot's Daughter, because it has a little bit of a kick to that with its ending.
Just for folks who may not be as familiar with the Bible as other people, the story of Lot, somewhat similar insofar as moving to, I can't remember if he was in Sodom or if he was just outside Gomorrah, but there's the whole story of the angels coming in, and if they can find, 10 good men, that they would spare the city. They eventually take shelter with Lot and his family. All of these people come from outside, so again, protecting the family, protecting the house. But when all of these people show up and they go, hey, you have 2 strangers in there, basically send them outside so we can fuck them, is how I understand the story. And he goes, no, these are my guests. Here's my daughters.
Take them.
Yeah, which is great. Then the angels are basically like, hey, man, you need to get you and your family the fuck out of here. We're going to lay waste to this city. Of course, there's the whole thing of them running away. Lot's wife turns around, and I really wish I remembered her first name. I don't even know if she has a first name.
I don't think she has one. I think it's just Lot's wife.
I think she's just Mrs. Lot, yeah.
My name is Lot, and I'm Abraham's cousin. I live in Sodom and Gomorrah. I live really right on the line of Sodom and Gomorrah. I met my wife about 600 years ago. We've been married for like 598 years.
I'm Lot's wife. Everybody refers to me as Lot's wife, but I have a name. I'm Myra Lot. Actually, the light of my life are my 2 daughters, Tracy and Stacy.
Mrs. Lot turns around, turns into a pillar of salt.
You can call her Eurydice if you want to.
Yes. But second part of the story, yes, very apropos. Second part of the story is now Lot is alone with his family, with his daughters, and the name of the second story that this was somewhat based on, I would say it's really much more based on Lot. And then Lot's Daughter is the follow-up story. And if you remember, again, in the Bible, Lot's daughters want to perpetuate the lineage. So they get Lot nice and drunk, and a couple nights in a row, they have their way with him, or he has some semi-consensual sex with them, or maybe not. Maybe it's even darker than that. But yeah, so when we come to Ward Moore's story, Lot's Daughter, he now has a new son, and his wife is gone, and his daughter, look at how nice my daughter looks. And yes, things are falling apart, but she really takes the place of her mother very well. Fucking dark.
She's stronger than her mother. She's more logical than her mother. Yeah, the stories are great. I had heard the name Ward Moore, but I had never read anything by him, and I immediately added a bunch of his books to my list. I think in some ways, actually, the first story is just written with such an intensity, and the dad is despicable, and you know that dad, you absolutely do, and so it has a great ending that shocked me, and the second story kind of gives a little bit of comeuppance in a way, I think, in the end. I would love to see an adaptation of that is a little bit closer to that, because it would be hard to watch, but it would be riveting.
And if you were doing a 1950s adaptation set in car culture of Orpheus, you could call it Orpheus and Furry Dice.
And that's where he makes the big bucks. I was laughing, of course, as he's going, the Ray Milland character's going on this quest to get the supplies, get the guns, get the gas. I love when they stop at a diner and they're talking about how they don't have any eggs anymore. And I was just like, oh, wow, everything old is new again.
That diner, by the way, the Saddle Peak Lodge, is still there. Yeah, it is now much grander. It is a kind of, it's in Calabasas. It's at 419 Cold Canyon Road. It also appears in episode 83 of Perry Mason that aired on January 30th, 1960. But it's funny when I'm looking at that or the movie ranch that appears in it, there's a kind of subterranean dialogue between all of the different movies that feature the stock locations that you do when you're shooting on the cheap in Los Angeles. I forget whether it was Sam Goldwyn or Harry Cohn who's alleged to have said, a tree is a tree, a rock is a rock, shoot it in Griffith Park or don't shoot it. But there are these sort of trope locations that pop up in movie after movie. And in some ways, it takes you out of the film because you're saying, oh, my God, Saddle Peak Lodge. I officiated at a wedding at Saddle Peak Lodge. It takes you out of the movie, but it also sews you back into this Los Angeles movie world where there are 5 or 6 iconic locales which have doubled for 50 or 60 places in as many movies. If both of you come to Los Angeles at the same time, and I will take you to Saddle Peak Lodge and we can make our pilgrimage, I would be very happy to do that.
Blast the jazz, whatever we do.
It took me so long to figure out who was playing the mother in this film, where I knew her from.
I know her as, I can't stand it. I would never, ever have figured out that that was her.
Oh, she's so good. But when I figured it out, I was like, oh, I see it in the face. Of course, she was in The Big Knife and a whole bunch of other stuff. But yeah, that role in Singing in the Rain, so freaking classic. God.
Is iconic. One of the best supporting performances in a movie of all time.
And then using Frankie Avalon as this kind of, I guess it would have been a box office draw at this time, right? This is before the bikini films?
Yes, I think so.
I feel like he, in at least the quick trivia I read, like he was already doing these. Let's see.
I know he was a teen idol as a musical star, but I don't know to what extent he was a movie star before this. That he was, but I don't know.
This Beach Party was 63, Operation Bikini, 63. Wow, he did a lot of bikini movies very quickly.
So this is right before.
Right before he was going to break out.
Almost right after Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which is what I really remember him for. And he did a few other things before that. But okay, so he's probably, not quite box office idol, but more the musical hit. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's cast this guy in here and bring in some of the teeny boppers. He looks amazing in this movie. I didn't really recognize the daughter too much. And speaking of this being such a patriarchal film, she gets barely anything to do.
Oh, she gets nothing. I was mad because I felt like I was just annoyed because I think it's like, what is it, probably 45 minutes in the film when she finally gets to say something. And what does she say? It's, okay, we have to go, Carrie. We found the place we're going to live as the world ends. Let's go get it ready. And she says, what a drag. I'm bored. Yes, that's great work right there. But that actress, I felt bad after because I was so angry at her as a character. And then I realized she's in Spider Baby.
Oh, yes, she is.
She is the blonde in Spider Baby. And she's so great in that. But yes, it's not her fault that she just gets... No, I'm sorry. She doesn't get nothing to do. She does get sexually assaulted. Which has nothing to do with her in the end. It is all about how the dad is sad. It's the dad's responsibility and he'll never forgive himself.
Was he insufficiently good at protecting his women? It's not about them. It's about him.
Yes. We never see her actual react to it after. We never see, is she recovering? Is she defensive? Is she anything? Like, nope, you would never know this girl just went through a horrific rape.
And Ray Milland's wife says maybe you should talk to her. And you're expecting that will be the next scene. And instead, the next scene is Frankie Avalon clumsily trying to pick up the woman that they rescued.
Yes. So there's a second woman in this movie who is also being sexually assaulted. And they do decide to help her. Okay, come stay with us. We'll take care of you. And I think this woman is not on the market right now. And every scene, it's just Frankie Avalon making eyes at her and, here, I picked a flower for you. She does not want that.
No.
She doesn't.
You should get this woman to a trauma center right now.
Before we move off of actors, I just want to sing the praises of a couple of sort of smaller actors. Dick McCallion, who plays Carl, who is just such an axiom of cinema. All of those beatnik movies, Delinquent School and the Crazy that we mentioned. But he had a career that goes through Robin and the Seven Hoods, Von Ryan's Express. He is Loach in Chinatown, for God's sake. Once you see his face, you see it everywhere. He is almost the Dick Miller of
the beatniks.
Here he is cast, let's just say not cast against type. He's doing that thing that he often does. But I just love, oh my God, it's Dick McCallion. And then the other guy who I recognized was the grocery store owner, who's an actor named O.Z. Whitehead. And if Preston Sturgis had the Ale and Quell company, his stock company of actors, John Ford had a bunch of them too. And he was one of the John Ford stock company actor guys. He's in everything from Grapes of Wrath to Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And again, once you see his face, you see it everywhere. He's one of that great generation of, I guess you could say, character actor, although that seems a little insufficient. Non-leading men, for the most part, supporting actors who, once you become aware of them, have great faces. And once you become aware of them, it's like, oh my God, there he is again. Whoa. And I think Ray Milland, who is an actor, knew in his mental or even maybe physical Rolodex a whole bunch of guys who could come in, do a day or two's work, deliver, and do it professionally, not have to be, what's my motivation, or any of that stuff.
I was thrilled to see Paul Gleason as the gas station attendant about 10 minutes in that gets his lights punched out.
There didn't raise me to be a hero for $4. It's a great line.
Just in case people of my generation need a little reminding, Paul Gleason, the principal from The Breakfast Club, you mess with the bull, you get the horns. So great seeing him here where he just looks like he's still wet behind the ears. And yeah, it's about 30 minutes in when we finally get the roughnecks coming in here, these teenage hoodlums, and they really become the motivation for the whole second part of the film because we think we're done with them for a little while once they find their new world.
Swiss Family Robinson. It's kind of what it feels like for a bit. Let's build a house in a cave.
But those of us who make our living screenwriting know that they're going to come back.
You didn't kill him. You just shot him. It was a grace.
But they are the kind of motor that kicks you into the second act of this and changes it a little bit from the dominant tone being, is Ray Milland going to be able to keep his family together by being an authoritative, strong leader of the population of basically this 1962 Mercury Monterey custom? Or what's it going to be like when they are tangling with the anarchy of this new dog-eat-dog world that they're now finding themselves in?
Ray Milland has one of the best ways to enter traffic that I've ever seen when he is trying to get on to the freeway again from a side road, unable to get on there because going back to the short story, that's a lot of it is the traffic and trying to make it through and getting down this road.
Yeah, not use all your gas, just idling.
And here he's trying to get back into the road. Nobody's stopping. Nobody's allowing him to merge. So do you know what you do? You just get a big old bucket of gasoline, throw that out onto the freeway, light it on fire, and that gives you a little bit of a path.
Yeah.
And look, New York traffic can be rough. I'm not going to lie. I did watch that and think.
A little super soaker.
I want to give a little plug here, if I may, to, I think we all know IMDb.
The good old IMDb.
IMCDB, International Movie Car Database.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, I have used that one.
I went, of course, there to see what kind of car is that, because it struck me in many of its sort of configurations and aspect ratio to be a kind of second cousin to the car that Lemmy Caution drives in Alphaville. It's a Mercury Monterey. It's a Ford product, and all the Ford products share the basic body style, although different trim levels. according to IMCDB, whom I trust absolutely explicitly, it was a 1962 Mercury Monterey Custom. It was a 15-foot Kenskill travel trailer in tow, and you actually see the Kenskill logo at some point. And I love it that somewhere there is somebody who cares enough about this to document it. The interiors were not shot in a 1962 Mercury Monterey Custom because the Mercury Monterey Custom is a kind of small-ish car. It is not what we now would consider a compact or subcompact, but it's not one of those large land sharks. So in order to shoot the interiors capaciously enough, they used a 1960 Mercury Montclair, which is a size level up from that. Cool. Okay, you're shooting a movie, you've got your sort of picture car, but then you're shooting the interiors, and no, it's cramped. But the idea that there's somebody who cares enough about cars and cares enough about movies to actually do that research. And here we are, because somebody is obsessive and batshit crazy in the best possible sense, we get to revel in these things that we now know that we would never have known on our own. My hat is off.
I would believe that my dad would have done that. However, my dad isn't good enough for the internet to have executed that, because he is somebody who would watch this kind of movie and say, that can't be the inside of that car. That's too small. And just a memory I have is, as a child, Barbie's 1957 Chevy was the car for Barbie. It was this pink Chevy. And my dad was helping me put it together when I was 8 years old. And I remember him doing it and putting it down and looking at me and being very torn about something and saying, I'm really glad they did this because it's a toy for kids and they should have this. But I just have to say, in 1957, there would not have been seatbelts in the back seat of this car.
I am disappointed that one of my other favorite movie databases, the Internet Movie Firearms Database, does not have an entry for this, because then they'd be able to tell us all of the guns that we're seeing.
There's multiple guns and they play huge plot points, and they're apparently very easy to aim and fire. Everybody's really quick at figuring that out.
Somebody's letting me down.
That is very disappointing.
Or the movie internet stock location, which I imagine that's where, I know you know where all of these locations are, but I love when they go from real location and then walk right onto a set. And we are so set bound for quite a lot of this second act, where we are just walking through a bunch of either fake trees or trees they've just planted on a soundstage. Man, oh man, does that really just ring a bell where it's no, we're on a soundstage now. Yes.
They had 3 weeks.
That feels like it. Yeah.
One of the things I love about the Arkoff-Nicholson movies and the Corman New World stuff is, let's make a virtue of necessity. We've got no money. We've got 3 weeks. We've got these actors. We've got these locations, but we're making a movie. So we're going to make it.
Something also I think really neat about a kind of stark, undecorated end of the world film. Very different movie, but also about the end of the world in a very different way. Something I love is the just blandness of the visuals of the movie The Rapture, where it just feels there is nothing visually interesting and that is deliberate. And it just puts it in a different headspace when you watch it. And there's a little bit of that here, where it just, I think we see a mushroom cloud quickly. There's no real visual style or attempt at panache to the movie. And it's fine because it lets you focus on the story.
These days, if we were to see a Roland Emmerich post-apocalyptic movie, we would go for the special effects in some ways.
Yeah. Well, we'd have 20 minutes of that mushroom cloud.
Yeah, we would. In this, there is one shot of a mushroom cloud and one shot of a sort of ascending whatever. Clearly, either stock footage is primitively matted in, but maybe not even. But that's not what we came for. We didn't come for the grandeur of the special effects or the awe of it or the shock of it or the, oh my God, that looks so real. We're here for something else.
We're here for good storytelling. And that's what we're getting with this. I love, so simple, this whole idea of the reintroduction of these hoodlums done in such a beautiful way, and maybe a reference to Moses, this whole thing where mom's doing laundry, daughter's on the shore, and mom accidentally drop a shirt or something into the water, and we follow that down. Then we go past the daughter, and then we keep going down, and then a hand reaches in and pulls it up, and sure enough, it's one of those toughs that we saw before who's just, oh, somebody's around here. Okay.
And if that thing came from upstream, we're going to go there and find humans to prey on. A long time ago, there were some women by the shore of a river, not unlike the one we see in the movie, and floating down through the rushes is a basket with a little baby in it. And they say, oh my God, it's a basket with a baby in it. And they pluck it out from the rushes and they go to the Pharaoh and present this child to the Pharaoh and say, Pharaoh, look at this baby. It's the most beautiful child we've ever seen. And the Pharaoh looks and says, this baby is really ugly. And the women say, but he looked so good in the rushes.
That's a lot of bull.
Just in terms of exposition, there is lightning, hope it doesn't rain. It came from behind us. And there's a sense that, okay, could be lightning, could be this, could be that. And then there's a second one that wasn't lightning. Maybe they're testing. So the existence of one could be anything. The existence of two, therefore, means purpose. It reminds me a lot of any random plane can crash into the World Trade Center. Once the second one crashes, that's something else. Or Goldfinger saying the first is happenstance, the second is coincidence, the third is enemy action. There is something about the other shoe dropping, which I find an extraordinarily beautiful piece of storytelling, of narrative unwinding that is done here. And again, like many of the things, is some of this dialogue cheesy? Absolutely. But the storytelling is done with, I think, great economy and intent. And I love the fact that if you're operating on a very limited number of shooting days and a very limited budget, the thing that will get you through again and again is the storytelling is, you know, what really comes through.
The efficiency, the fact that it opens and very quickly, we don't need a lot of backstory. We don't need to know that it's the Russians or it's World War III or it's this or that. It is very immediate setup of here's dad, here's mom, the kids, they're lazy teenagers. Let's go. Here it happens. Now we move into action. It is within the first 5 minutes, I think, that he is heading to the grocery store and with a plan. And some movies move like that, and I think it's for the better, but very easy to make that opening a good 15 minutes before we get to them back in the car going to the grocery store.
It's lean and economical, and there's not so much wasted effort in this film. Because we know we're in the grips of storytellers, when there does seem to be something that momentarily doesn't make sense, or what's that about, or where's that coming from, we have the faith that they will, in very short order, pay off that setup.
I'm very surprised that Frankie gets shot towards the end here, and that we actually don't see him recover. We have the scene with the doctor that kind of fixes him up a little bit, and then can't really do too much more, sends them off on their own way, and they get stopped by the military. And of course, being a fan of 28 Days Later, I think, okay, now you're dead.
Oh no, this is even worse.
But they flag him down. Okay, it's all right. Basically, it's okay to go back to Los Angeles, guys.
It's like a missed ending instead.
And then that great title card of there must be no end, only a new beginning. What a way to end this.
Right. And it's, oh my God, there's this car, they're all going to die. And it turns out, thank God, it's the police, which is in some ways the mirror image of a Jordan Peele ending.
There's a big difference between this family and Chris in that movie, right? And that is the thing. I don't think this movie intended in any way to be overly conservative, nuclear family. I don't think it was as politically minded as that. But the way it watches today is just, this is the American way. We have this perfect family. Of course, they're white, but this entire movie is. But just that this, okay, yeah, they're doing it. They're Christians, right? They are saying grace before their meals. They might kill people, but that's because they have to protect their own. And see, even in the end, what does the policeman or the army guy say as he waves him over?
That's 5 more.
5 more what?
5 more that are okay. They come from the hills. No radiation sickness.
Yep. 5 good ones.
We're rebuilding. We've got 5 perfect specimens of Christianity, and they are clearly upstanding because they still were shaving, and Ray Milland still wearing his hat. So we know it's going to be okay. This is the kind of people we want to continue in society. And again, in 2025, that reads a little icky. I know it was a different time and it's not intended that way, but I think it just feels so specifically a particular portrait of America, if you will.
I would maintain, though, that there is a certain kind of, in movies of late 50s and early 60s, it's all going to be all right, which we, the audience, know that the scars left by the movie will persist down onto many generations. And I think it's Hollywood's way of giving you what, on the level of plot, is a happy ending, but on the level of emotional affect is an undertow. I think a lot about the Nick Ray movie Bigger Than Life, where Ray Milland does a lot of cortisone and turns crazy and tries to kill his son. Another biblical haha. And at the end of it, they're in the hospital. They've finally figured out that it's the cortisone that's been driving him to these delusions, and they're going to get him off of it, and he's going to be a good dad again, and the family's going to be together again, and they all gather around the bedside in the hospital. But Nick Ray shoots it at a slight Dutch tilt, and you're looking at it and you're realizing, oh no, for the purposes of whatever the equivalent of Father Breen and the Hayes Commission, yes, everything's going to be all right. But boy, is that not the message the visuals are telling us. And I think there's something of the same thing going on here, which is ostensibly he's going to get to the hospital. He's not going to die. They're probably not even going to have to amputate his leg. We're going back to civilization. It's going to be okay. But nothing in the pit of my stomach, either medicated or unmedicated, tells me that this world is going to be okay. And I like that. There's a lot of that stuff going on. When Ray Milland says, for the next few days, you're going to have the kind of togetherness you've always dreamed of. Unpack that. What does that mean in terms of expectations for 1950s white Christian families and what we know of the world? Or the kind of weird, is this Frankie Avalon's coming of age through trial? I just keep coming back to that line where, what do you do when your dad says, I want you to shave every day, or in Rick's case, maybe every other day?
So much of this movie takes place in that car that we're talking about. We almost start in the car, but we definitely end in the car. Maybe, 20, 30 minutes out of the car? But that we have the credits playing over them still driving is wild for me. And we go back to that radio so many times in the end credits. And I found it fascinating that at the beginning of the movie, when the title comes up, it's all in black letters with a white outline. At the end of the movie, it's now in white letters, no black outline. It's almost like it's giving us hope through just the font choice. I'm like, am I stretching? I don't think I am, because they're being so deliberate about these end credits.
And the music, too. The music is very triumphant and cheery. And yeah, we got this. We're going in the right direction. Yeah, the right people survived.
This family vacation from hell, starting off with Ray Milland there with his fishing rod. And he's just, I can't wait to go out with my family and catch some big ones. Me and the boy, we're going to bond out in the river.
When civilization gets civilized, I'll rejoin.
Being like 16 and being in the backseat of the car of your parents going fishing, like, it sounds like hell.
That moment in the short story, to go back to that, when they have to put the dog out of the car.
Yes. I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, this dad is already awful. And of course, the dad says, no dog. And almost there's a part of me that it's terrible, because my internet database is doesthedogdie.com. That's what I look at anytime there's an animal in a movie, and I just need to separate myself from the emotionality of having to worry about this animal. But it's such a powerful moment in the short story that is such a way to establish somebody as willing to throw their young child's dog out the window of the car to move on and survive. I would not have wanted to see that, but I think it would have gone a long way in establishing exactly what kind of man or what kind of person Ray Milland was going to be and could be, to have him say, put the dog outside. I don't think there's any coming back from it, though. It's one of those things where a lot of audience would just never walk out the screen, rightfully.
You can do anything you want to a human in a movie, but you harm a dog, that's,
Dogs don't hurt anybody. They're perfect.
Save the cat.
You were talking about Ray Milland at the beginning with a fishing rod, and it starts weirdly with an apology. Thanks for the help. I'm sorry, Anne. I'm sorry. Your thanks for the help is very sarcastic. There's a way in which, although they don't underline it, we are in the first act watching Ray Milland go from a guy who was a little bit, in the parlance of the time, henpecked. His wife is snarky at him and he's apologizing, to the guy who can take command. And that is such a common trope of movies in the late 50s, early 60s too, which is to see the Jim Backus wearing an apron in Rebel Without a Cause being the sort of, to use that period word, emasculated husband, either succeeding or failing into becoming the man that his son needs him to be.
It's a good point, too, because in the beginning, the husband and wife's interactions are very playful and sex. Like, they're making jokes about, I'm going to pull over and because the kids are sleeping. And it feels like such a different marriage once the story kicks in. Suddenly, their relationship, which seemed positive enough for a couple married probably 20 years at that time, but the affection seems to go very quickly once she is an obstacle, I think, to him on, we can't survive your way. You're not necessarily wrong in wanting us to, but we're not going to do that because otherwise we'll be dead.
Sorry about your mom, but sorry.
Yeah, that's it. We got to move on. Yeah.
But I love the way that, whether we're talking about this as, again, nuclear family in a post-nuclear world, or whether we're talking about this as a sort of father knows best, but with weaponry, or whether we're talking about this as veneer of civilization versus the anarchy of lawlessness, whether we're talking about it as a 50s beatnik, disturbed teenager movies and the threat they present to the white picket fence Eisenhower family, whether we're talking about it as Frankie Avalon's coming of age, whatever of the 10 or 12 films that are embedded in this one, they're all in really good sync. They don't seem to be warring with one another or competing for control of the narrative. What is the central metaphor? It's me. No, it's me. They all seem to be there as different flavor notes, which make this a kind of rich stew. There's a little cardamom. There's a little anise. It just makes me happy.
I'm very happy, too, when it comes to the presentation of this film, because I had only ever seen it full frame. And the scan of this that I think it was Radiance put out, widescreen, looks great. This movie looks better than I ever thought it had before. And I don't want to say looks better than it has any right to, but it just looks fantastic. And I thought, going back to Milland, he's like, okay, apparently he felt overwhelmed by the shooting schedule, and working with AIP was, like you said, probably very much a trial, but I think he knocked it out with some good stuff. I won't say this is a great movie, but I sure did have fun watching it.
I want to just, as a footnote, give a shout out to the guy who shot it, who is Gil Warrington, who shot 30, 40 features, most of them of little note, to be candid. As a cinematographer, you often don't get your choice of projects. You can start out as a cinematographer on The Lucy Show and end up shooting The Lucy Show, as actually happened. As a footnote to a footnote, Gil Warrington's mother, Lul Warrington, was an actress and was, at the time, when she was working for Universal, the only woman director in the entire world. There certainly was Alice Guy Blaché, and there certainly was Dorothy Orsner, and people that our generation is just now beginning to recover the histories of. But I love the fact that here's a guy who spent his lifetime as a good, serviceable, and I don't say that as a pejorative, cinematographer, serving the material over a long span with a mom who was the only woman film director in the entire freaking world.
What era was she directing?
Early teens.
It's never been easy for a woman director.
What are you talking about? Actually, I mean, that's why we have so many of them now. Look, 2 of them have Oscars. Come on. You have 3 of them. We're fine.
It's the white male directors who are having trouble getting work these days because they're the people who are really being discriminated against.
It really upsets me sometimes.
My mom was a pretty extraordinary woman, very gutsy, and was a single working mom, and she was working for the American Cancer Society, helping produce their public service announcements. Fight cancer with a checkup and a check. Made enough money to support her and support me. And she didn't want to be the client on the set anymore. She wanted to be one of the filmmakers. So at age 37, in 1960, as a single working mom, she went to NYU Film School when no women went to film school. She held her own. Her mentor was Hagen, who was Marty Scorsese's mentor and a whole generation of people. If you look at the end of Raging Bull, it says, I was blind, now I see. This film is dedicated to Hagen. He was that guy. And she got her ass pinched a lot as the only woman in class and made her requisite 16-millimeter black and white movie of the pigeons in Washington Square Park. When she got out of film school, she wanted to be a director. And nobody knew quite what to do with that. Well, Dorothy Arzner and Lul Warrington were just utterly unknown. Agnes Varda was doing directing in France, but nobody really knew about it. Barbara Hammer, I think, was making some wonderful softcore women porn films, but wasn't considered a director. Barbara Loden was several years down the pike. It was just, what is that? Woman director just did not compute. And so she wanted to be an assistant director, thinking that might be a path. And people said, we've got one. There was a woman named Nancy Littlefield who was a first AD in New York. And it was like, we have a woman AD.
I mean, maybe if she gets sick one day.
So she became a script supervisor. And that was a job that suited her well. And she did it for the rest of her life. And she was very good at it. And a lot of directors liked working with her. And she trained the next generation of script supervisors. And I think a lot about what she sacrificed as a single working mom in order to raise me. The dreams of her own that she put on the back burner in order to have and raise a child. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm even more grateful in many ways for what she refused to sacrifice to be a single working mom. And I think my life is so much the richer because of what she said she was unwilling to give up simply because she was a woman and a mother. And to the extent that I'm here now talking about Panic in the Year Zero ! A lot of that really is due to what she told me I would be capable of by her words, but also by her example. This may not be the appropriate place to do it, but I just want to say thanks.
On that note, we're going to take a break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
Ladies and gentlemen, Baby Jane Hudson.
I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above.
I wonder if you can guess who I am. I'm Baby Jane Hudson.
Who the hell was Baby Jane Hudson?
I've written a letter to Daddy saying I love you.
My sister doesn't ever go out. She's not fit to receive visitors.
Jane, I want to talk to you.
I'm afraid I have bad news. We'll probably have to sell the house. You aren't ever gonna sell this house. And you aren't ever gonna leave it.
She's sick and she's not getting any better.
You mean Jane? I think she seems much better lately. I was cleaning the cage. The bird got out. You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair.
But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
Jane, please. Don't do this to me. Jane! Jane, please!
That's right. We'll be back next week to kick off a celebration of Victor Buono with a look at his bravura performance in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Emily and Howard. So, Emily, what is the latest with you?
Apparently not talking about Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. I guess I'll have to listen to that one. Would have happily joined that episode, Mike. But in the meantime, I sometimes write about movies over at deadlydollshouse.com. And then the wonderful Christine Makepeace and I do a podcast together, also on Weird and Way Media, The Feminine Critique. And our next episode, which will probably be out by the time this drops, it's us kind of regrouping together and talking about our favorite beach movies. Will Frankie Avalon show up? I can't say.
Oh, come on. A discussion of beach movies? Unless you're just talking about a beach that makes you old.
Spoiler alert, that would totally be on my list because that zany, bonkers, dumb movie keeps showing up on the Sci-Fi or Sci-Fi channel now. And every time it's on, I'm like, oh, leave this on. It's entertaining. I never said I had good taste, by the way, just to be clear on that.
While we're on the subject of beach movies, so there was a family of Viennese intellectuals called the Kohners, Kohner, and because fascism, they came to the United States. And Paul Kohner became a literary and a talent agent and represented people like John Huston. Paul Kohner represented him, and the guy who wrote Treasure of the Sierra Madre represented all kinds of people for several generations. I think he represented Wim Wenders toward the end of his life. And his brother, Frederick Kohner, who was a scholar, was in essence the first person to get a PhD in film history, even though that category didn't quite exist, from the University of Vienna. And this very cultured emigre found himself in Malibu, blinking in the sunlight. He was writing little novels. There was one about Kiki of Montparnasse, a lovely book. I like it a lot. But feeling very displaced and not quite knowing what to do between what his life would have, should have, could have been had not the Nazis come to power, and this weird sun-dappled life he was now living in Malibu. And so just for kicks, he decided to write a little book about his daughter and her friends playing on the beach called Gidget. What we know of as beach movies today really is the kind of weird fever dream of a comically or tragically displaced Viennese intellectual.
And Howard, what's the latest with you, sir?
He just finished writing a pilot for what we hope will be a limited series called The Last Baron, based on the book of the same name by Tom Sankton. It's a nonfiction book about the kidnapping of the Baron Ampin from in front of his house in Paris in 1978 by a gang of leftist ideologues and petty car thieves and all kinds of unhealthy mental excitement among the members of his family. No, I'm not going to pay his ransom. You pay it. So there's that. And then I think this is the first place I publicly said this, but two of my novels, a very early novel, which is set in March of 1933 in Berlin in the filmmaking community, when all these people were trying to decide whether they should keep on making films for the Nazis or just take the next train to Paris and get the fuck out. It's a novel called Destiny Express. And then a much more recent novel called The Great Eastern, which is my sprawling, lavish, literary 19th century anti-colonial adventure novel. They're going to be reissued next year in uniform edition. So I get to be a novelist again and still get to romp in the playfields of filmed entertainment. And my current project is working on a screenplay for one of my very favorite French noir authors, a guy named Jean-Patrick Manchette, who wrote a lot of books that became some good movies, some indifferent movies, some Alain Delon movies. French bleak existential noir is like mother's milk to me, and I'm very happy that I get to work in the Manchette's cinematic universe again.
I just was recommending Destiny Express on our episode we did on Metropolis to kick off Sci-Fi July. So very appropriate that we're now talking with the author of that here in the wrapping up episode.
Thank you so much for that shout out. And I would like to remind your audience not to pay any extra for first edition because there's no other kind.
Thank you so much, folks, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdandwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.